Recently, ArenaNet confirmed that they are looking towards adding some permanent content to Guild Wars 2 instead of the temporary living story events we've been receiving recently. It is my understanding that the purpose of the living story was to make the world of Guild Wars 2 seem more alive and interesting, but to be honest, all I find it does is shift the player's attention away from their regularly daily activities to pursue these limited time rewards before they disappear. Now don't get me wrong, I think anything that breaks the daily grind is a good thing, and it's a system that works spectacularly with the holiday events such as Halloween, Winter's Day and the upcoming Dragon's Bash, but I don't think it's a great method for building upon the story of Guild Wars 2. Let me throw you a quote from ArenaNet's manifesto. "The MMO has lost the ability to make the player feel important. We have made a game for that player." Call me cynical, but I don't believe the current way the living story is presented does that at all. To ArenaNet's defense, trying to make a single player feel important in an MMO is not an easy thing to do. One of the biggest hurdles to overcome is telling a story that more than one player is taking part in. How can one player feel special or that their decisions are having an effect on the world around them when there are so many other players participating in the same story? Especially when these players are going to inevitably make different choices. And how can you then take it a step further and put all this into a living, changing world, as ArenaNet puts it, into the living story? Believe it or not, I think ArenaNet had a solid plan on how to do this, and scrapped it during development due to the lack of time and resources. Now, I can't find the source for this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been told that ArenaNet had to pass the creation of its personal story off to another company. This is backed up by the fact that some parts of the personal story, particularly in the Whispers arc, play out in a different style to the usual personal story. Those of you who watched our Top 10 Things Guild Wars 2 Needs to Improve video should remember the Balrog's personal story crossing over into the open world. Later on, he also had a personal story mission that took place almost entirely in the open world. I think this is how ArenaNet originally wanted the personal story to play out, in the open world where you could interact with NPCs for other players to see, as well as triggering events depending on your choices in the personal story. I can't speak for everybody, but I'd certainly feel like my choices meant something if the world around me reacted to the choices I'd made in the form of events and reactions from NPCs. While I went over a few problems and solutions to the problems with this system back in our top 10 video, another thing I went over in that video was removing realms from PvE and moving them all to an overflow based system. Now, I stand by that idea to this day, as I believe that is the best way ANET can turn Guild Wars 2 into a living, evolving world without permanently removing content. If you're not familiar with my ideas on this, you can click the annotation on the screen to hear them, as going over them again would just make this video longer than it needs to be. Go on, just pause this video and click the annotation there. It's going to open the video at the right point so you won't have to watch the whole thing. It's not going to kill you. Anyway, in that video I went over how the server merging could create different versions of zones depending on how far along they were in their personal story, in reference to the NPCs, that is. But what if we kicked it up a notch and applied it to the story instead? This opens up many amazing possibilities. For example, players complain that the Elder Dragons don't feel like an immediate threat, as they never actively attack anything directly, or even send their minions to attack any major settlements outside the few instance parts of the personal story. Now imagine if at the start of the upcoming Guild Wars 2 expansion, it didn't take place in some far-off new zone miles away from your home, but instead in the starting zones your character grew up with. Now, imagine that instead of an instanced area where the story played out, this story is told in a zone full of other players trying their best to push the dragon forces back. Sounding interesting yet? Imagine then that if the NPCs in your story were showing up and participating in the events relevant to your story on the open map for all to see. Other players could hear you and your NPCs conversing to get a taste of your story without having to go to an instanced version of the area. Now, I'm not saying remove instance areas completely, but instead just reserve them for missions with special mechanics that would not be feasible in the open world. Also, how much more exciting would it be if the dragon's forces, maybe with the aid of the dragon himself, actually routed the defending forces, and a desperate evacuation plan followed by fleeing the dragon's might was the focus of this story, instead of a calm push into the dragon's territory like we got with the original story. Anyone who played the Originals Prophecies campaign in Guild Wars 1 knows how having your foes destroy something dear makes you feel about them. Hell, many Guild Wars 1 players still hate the fact that the Char are a playable race, and that they have to play alongside them in Guild Wars 2. Now, some might argue that having different versions of each zone is the same as the phasing system in World of Warcraft. Phasing in World of Warcraft didn't work out very well, but there are some key differences between the way Guild Wars 2 and World of Warcraft handle quests. In Guild Wars 2, events, well, the large meta ones anyway, we have failure states and success states that affect other events as well as the event we're working on. Because of this, players often replay the same events, whereas in World of Warcraft, any quests that are not specifically marked as dailies are a one-time only deal. Couple this with my proposed system of a personal story in the open world, bringing different NPCs to events or different events altogether, and the zone should be a very different experience each time you go there. Speaking of dailies, to prevent the older versions of these zones from becoming total ghost zones, if merging the servers wasn't enough to keep them populated, ArenaNet could easily add dailies that can only be completed in past versions of the zone. Oh, I probably should have clarified that under the no PvE realm system I proposed in the top 10 things Guild Wars 2 would like to improve video, players would be able to choose the version of the zone they would like to go to, if they didn't mind breaking the immersion. You know, a simple, "you are about to relive events prior to" message, like the ones non-native campaign players got from the early missions in the original Guild Wars. That should be more than enough to keep everybody happy. I'm sure many Guild Wars 2 players would be happy to go back to the Molten facility under this kind of a system. So what do you guys think? Keep in mind these ideas are just the building blocks to even greater things. I just feel the current way the living story is being presented isn't the best way to go about it. I feel ArenaNet won't be making any big living story events relevant to the Elder Dragons, or anything really big actually, because why would you spend ages making and polishing content that is only going to be available for a limited time? By all means, if ArenaNet really want to push players into the living story when it's current, those limited time achievements with limited time rewards should be more than enough to entice people to play it while it's relevant. As always guys, please feel free to share your thoughts and comments below, but if you like this idea and would like to bring it to ArenaNet's attention, or if you have your own ideas to improve it, leave your comments on the official Guild Wars 2 forums where ArenaNet will see it. There's a link to the forums to a post on this video in the About section below. Balls that one right up. Anyway, thanks for watching guys, and I hope to see you next time. There are many people complaining that Null bugs out and puts his shield up right after or very soon after the party removes it. This isn't so much a bug as it is a design flaw. Null's shield ability has a cooldown just like any of our skills, and it begins coming off cooldown not after his shield is removed, but after he casts it. His shield is on a 45-second cooldown, so if it takes your group 45 seconds or longer to get that shield off, he's going to cast it straight away once you do. Just be sure to get that shield off as soon as possible to prevent this from happening.
Actually, I did know about that.
How did this happen? Let's see if I can... Oh god! Okay, that doesn't work.